When a baby is born, it's a moment to celebrate. But when you're a royal, it's not just a family affair. Parenting for the royals is a job unlike any other.
There was this real sense that duty needed to be followed.
After all, their children need somewhat different skills to the average child.
They're taught how to eat in public, how to behave in public, how to greet people, and they're taught that from a really young age.
But royal parents struggle with the same trials and tribulations that all parents do.
For the Platinum Jubilee, we saw Prince Louis pull an entire range of faces.
Raising children born into a role they have no choice over.
You can't put it back in the box, that's it. They've then got to carry on that public role from that day forward.
Each family must find slithers of normality where they can.
She took them on holidays, and you would see how much fun she was having with them.
This is your royal guide to parenting and how you too can raise your child with the poise of a princess. The birth of a child is a joyous occasion for the general public and future kings alike. But unbeknownst to them, each royal new arrival is born into a job. Whether they are the first or 31st in line, there is a chance that they could one day rule the nation.
It must be quite a daunting prospect, growing up knowing that you're destined for the throne.
And how the royals choose to parent these mini-monarchs in training goes a long way to determining the kind of ruler they'll turn out to be. But even before the little one arrives, there are protocols in place. Starting with telling the world. Today, you're most likely to hear about a royal pregnancy at about the 12-week mark. But go back 500 years and before even announcing a new heir, the monarch needed to make sure that there was definitely one on the way.
For queens of the Tudor period, like Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, you wouldn't announce that the Queen was pregnant until the so-called quickening, until the baby kicked.
Usually between 16 and 20 weeks, it's somewhat later than many pregnancy announcements today. But even as medicine has improved, and they've known much sooner, royals have chosen to keep their pregnancies hidden from the public. Whether for privacy reasons or worry of miscarriage, in the early 20th century, this was royal protocol.
Going back into recent history, so let's say Queen Elizabeth's pregnancies, they weren't actually announced as they perhaps are announced today.
There was a sort of vague reference to the fact that she wasn't going to be carrying out so many public engagements.
That was kind of a subtle way of saying she's taking some time out to have a baby, and then she would just appear with baby and everyone would act surprised.
In 1949, Elizabeth proudly presented Prince Charlie to the world. He was the first baby born to a British heir presumptive in 1,000 years. This tiny, sneezing prince stands next in line of succession after his mother.
Today, things are a bit different.
Royal pregnancies have all been announced in different ways, and the format tends to depend on what's going on at the time, really.
More often than not, it happens via social media.
And sometimes the family have been forced to make early announcements.
With Kate's pregnancies, it had to happen differently because she became very unwell. She had really severe morning sickness, and with her first pregnancy, she was hospitalised with that.
It's been a tricky few days, week or so, but obviously we're immensely thrilled. It's great news. Early days,
But even when the royal pregnancy is announced, there's always some details that are held back.
We know that you're never going to find out the sex of the baby. We're not going to have a great big gender reveal. The due date is kept a secret as well.
With the baby announced, it becomes a waiting game for the family, the media, and the entire nation. Until finally, the big day arrives. Today, there are more than 20 specialist staff that are constantly on call to deliver a royal baby.
Teams are on standby for quite a long time before to make sure that if anything arrives early, everyone's poised for action.
But in the late 15th and 16th century, and the time of the Tudors, a royal birth was even more meticulously managed, and by one individual in particular. Margaret Beaufort was the mother of Henry VII.
She was a very dominant force in the court, and she set down this set of ordinances, as they were known, really rules for a royal birth.
Designed to create the perfect environment.
They were very detailed and encompassed everything. The expectant mother could only be served by women. Daylight must be shut out from the birthing chamber, even down to stuffing material into keyholes. And all of these had a purpose. They would ensure the safe delivery of a prince.
When the moment itself came, it was far from a private affair.
Royal births until the beginning of the sort of 20th century were observed and representative of government being there because, of course, this was about the future monarch.
It was about, if you like, certifying the birth, that the child that was born was indeed the child of the mother that had been pregnant, that there was no changing of children, muddying of the royal line.
This tradition continued all the way up to the birth of Queen Elizabeth II, whilst at the time she wasn't directly in line for the throne.
Because she was a granddaughter of King George V, and she might one day be in the direct line of succession, it was absolutely key to legitimise, to certify that she was a child of the royal blood.
Historically, there were also observers there in case of medical emergencies.
Before the arrival of modern medicine, often you would have on hand a member of the clergy who would, if necessary, be there to say the last rites with a woman if she was dying in childbirth.
Unfortunately, this wasn't a rare occurrence before the invention of antibiotics. And when royals discovered they were pregnant, alongside preparing for a new baby, they also prepared their will. Both Henry VIII's mother, Elizabeth of York, and his third wife, Jane Seymour, died from infections just days after giving birth in what was known as childbed fever. In 1817, heir to the throne, Princess Charlotte also died of infection after giving birth.
The death of Princess Charlotte threw the monarchy into crisis because she was the only heir of George IV and his estranged wife. And now there was little prospect of them having another legitimate heir. So suddenly, the brothers of George IV quickly started discarding their mistresses and taking wives in an attempt to produce a legitimate heir to the throne.
For the next 100 years or so, it was still common practice for royals to give birth at home.
Queen Elizabeth was born at the home of her maternal grandparents in Mayfair. It's now actually a Chinese restaurant.
A tradition she continued when having her own children.
3 of them born inside Buckingham Palace. Princess Anne was born in Clarence House. As times have gone on, same as everyone else, more people have chosen to have births in hospitals, and the royal family has been the same.
While all the action happens behind closed doors, the nation waits for news with bated breath.
And all day there was no announcement. It was after 10 at night that those who waited, and they were very many, heard the tremendous news, a royal baby and a boy.
With the arrival of a bouncing baby, the next job is spreading the word. And when you're a royal, it's not as simple as updating the family WhatsApp group. With their bundle of joy safely in their arms, there is one thing a royal couple must do first.
So with a royal birth, the most important thing is that the monarch is told first.
What follows is the official announcements. The notice on the gates, a town crier. And more recently, public announcements. Via radio.
It has been announced officially from Buckingham Palace during the past hour that Her Royal Highness the Princess Elizabeth, Duchess of Edinburgh, was safely delivered of a prince at 9:14 p.m. today.
And television.
Meghan and myself had a baby boy early this morning, a very healthy boy. Mother and baby are doing incredibly well. It's been the most amazing experience I could ever possibly imagine.
Finally, bells ring out at some of the nation's great churches. And a traditional 41-gun salute for all new princes and princesses.
They're very important with royal births because you can guarantee if you haven't seen a mobile device, if you haven't picked up a paper, if you haven't turned on the news, you'll hear the gun salutes and you'll know that something big has happened.
With a hotly anticipated royal baby finally here, it's time for the new royal parents and the entire nation to celebrate. Up and down the country, people hotly anticipate a royal birth. With the news of the new arrival spreading like wildfire, what the people want to know next is, what's the name? Will it be George, William, Victoria, or Elizabeth maybe? A name fit for a king or queen.
Have you thought of a name yet?
Yeah, we thought of one or two, but a bit of an argument about it. Yeah, we'll find one eventually.
Whilst there are no formal rules stopping you, you can't just call a young royal whatever you fancy.
You've generally tended to find that members of the royal family who are high up in the line of succession have chosen those traditional names. So we see that with a lot of them often taken from ancestors, using the names of their relatives.
Prince and Princess of Wales decided that for Charlotte, Diana would appear there because he wanted to honour his mother.
Prince Harry named his daughter Lilibet, a pet name for the young Elizabeth II, his late grandmother.
Its origins really date from the time that the late Queen was a small girl, couldn't pronounce Elizabeth properly, came up with Lilibet, and George V, her grandfather, picked it up.
But it's not only the first name that needs careful consideration.
The middle names are very carefully picked because those could be the names that the child, if they become a king or queen, want to use.
In 1837, when Princess Alexandrina took the throne, she did so under her middle name, Victoria. Her son also followed suit.
Victoria's eldest son and heir, Bertie, actually chose to be Edward rather than Albert, his given name. And he said that that was out of respect for his father, Prince Albert.
A tradition Elizabeth Alexandra Mary, who we know better as the late Queen Elizabeth II, decided not to follow.
when she became queen, when she was in Kenya, and she was asked by her private secretary, well, what name do you want to take as queen? And she said, well, my own, of course. And so she became Queen Elizabeth II.
Charles Philip Arthur George, or King Charles III, used his first name too. And as for the future generations, William Arthur Philip Louis, or George Alexander Louis, we will have to wait and see. One thing the modern royal family is sure about, though, is whoever is born first will take the throne, be it a boy or a girl. Today, the line of succession is secure, but historically, you had to fight for your right to majesty.
Before the Norman conquest, the crown tended to be won and lost on the battlefield.
If a king was toppled, the other army's leader would take the throne. It meant that an heir would need to know how to fight.
You couldn't just swan around in the palaces. You had to don your suit of armor and fight for your father, the king, and prove your worth as a future king yourself.
Since 1066, succession has instead followed family bloodlines, and the need for an heir has been the primary concern of our royals. Without one, you leave room for other families to make claim to the throne, and you often needed more than one.
Back over the centuries, people often didn't live, and a monarch would need an heir to succeed him, as it was at that point, but also a spare. In other words, somebody who could become the heir if the heir indeed didn't live to adulthood. In many cases, the spare actually was called upon and became some of our great monarchs.
For centuries, this need for a male heir preoccupied many rulers. Perhaps the most famous spare was Henry VIII.
He became king after the death of his elder brother, Prince Arthur.
He knew firsthand that you needed multiple, ideally male, heirs. 1 year after his marriage to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, she miscarried at around 6 months pregnant. But just a year later, on New Year's Day 1511, Catherine gave birth to a boy, Prince Henry. Henry VIII finally had an heir, and a son at that. So overjoyed at the prospect, Henry put on a party.
It involved really a 2-week celebration. There were days of feasting and, as well as the jousts themselves, lots of entertainments because the Tudors were still quite a new, fragile dynasty. So he was celebrating the fact that he'd secured his dynasty long into the future, as he thought, because now he had that precious son and heir.
Sadly, Henry Jr. only lived a few weeks, but the tournament in his honor is memorialized in the Westminster Tournament Roll,
which is a beautifully illuminated manuscript, and it shows the king jousting, wearing armor decorated with the initials of his beloved wife.
Henry went on to have 5 more wives. His third, Jane Seymour, provided him with a son who became Edward VI when just 9 years old. But even in more recent times, the so-called spares have taken to the throne.
Then we had the abdication, and then Edward VIII went away, and then we had George VI. So spares are quite useful.
In the 21st century, the world is watching when news of a royal baby comes along, be it first, second, or even third born. And once we know the name, what we really want is to catch a glimpse of the new monarch in the making. For the modern royals, that means facing the world's media as soon as they step out of the hospital doors.
Royal mothers have always left the Linda wing of St Mary's Hospital, and there are probably in excess of 200 photographers out there, all taking a picture.
The first picture of the new baby is the image that all the photographers want. And in many cases, Anwar Hussain, the longest-serving royal photographer,
I've been photographing the royal family for 50 to 60 years now.
got it. But how does he do it? Beginning his career photographing the kings and queens of rock and roll,
From Mother Teresa to Beatles, Rolling Stone, Elton John.
Anwar used his celebrity style to capture the royals in a new light.
Because I don't like those very stiff pictures of them. That's why I wanted to bring rock and roll into their life.
This made Anwar one of the royals' favourite photographers. Some of his pictures have become as famous as the subjects themselves. From the Queen Mother to Princess Diana, and even the latest royal brood. But he still had to fight for the shot at the maternity hospital of choice for the modern royals, the Lindo wing.
So you had to mark your position, stay there, which was quite a long time. We had a couple of days staying there.
But more often than not, the wait was worth it. He was there when Diana first presented William to the world. And Harry too.
But nowadays they're quite good. They mark the position, allow certain photographers to come, and they pull the name out of the hat, and it depends where your position is. Before that, you just have to cut and wait for things to happen.
Over the years, Anwar has captured a number of royal babies on the steps.
This is George, and this one is Harry, second. And they're both wearing red, so I thought it was a good comparison of the two of them, styles and the way they came out. So it's a nice contrast, so I was able to do that because I photographed both of them.
Given their importance, you'd think that the royal parents wouldn't let their photogenic young heirs out of their sight. But with engagements to attend and tours to take, there isn't always time for busy royals to personally look after the kids. Just like any working parent, members of the royal family need a bit of help when it comes to childcare. And whilst some young royals have been to nursery, usually they require a nanny.
A royal household would certainly need a live-in nanny for a full service, and this requires the nanny to be there 24 hours a day.
You have parents who are very busy, who have high levels of responsibility, and so having that help and having a nanny who is able to provide a grounding for a world for the child is really important.
Over the years, royal parents have taken different approaches when it comes to nannies. But it all started in medieval times with the role of the governess. A nanny, but with even more responsibility.
The governess does pay more attention to the educational focus of the child's development.
One of the most famous goes back to the days of the Tudors. At the age of 4, the future Queen Elizabeth I was raised by her governess, Catherine, or Cat, Ashley. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, had been executed by her father, Henry VIII, and she herself had been exiled. There was no one else left to raise the young princess. Cat was like a mother to Elizabeth and stayed by her side until her death 28 years later. More recently, the governess role has changed somewhat.
They would be more there to tutor.
And nannies take on the caring role.
Royal nannies usually start with children from birth, straight from the hospital, up until 6 months. And after that, we would usually have another nanny that would take over. and she would be there until the child is of school age.
You can't rely on grandparents, you can't rely on great-grandparents, but you can rely on a nanny.
After all, as any parent knows, looking after children can be tough, especially if there's more than one.
It's more responsibility looking after two little ones, especially when George is around. He's a little monkey.
Nannies can help to give young royals a more normal start to life.
King George VI and Queen Elizabeth hired Marion Crawford as a nanny for their two daughters, and by the standards of the day, I think she was quite informal, quite free-spirited.
King George and his queen couldn't do the everyday things with their children, but the nanny could. Young princesses, Elizabeth and Margaret, would be taken by the nanny to ballet lessons, on trips on the Underground, and even visits to the zoo.
It's always important to remember that they are still children and they still need their fun time.
Today, the nannies of choice are Norland nannies. Their charges have included Princesses Eugenie and Beatrice, as well as more recently George, Charlotte and Louis. Trained at a special college in Bath, they are taught some rather specialist skills. Pediatric first aid, self-defense, even evasive driving.
These could be children that are our future kings and queens, so they need exceptional care.
Over the years, royal nannies and governesses have taken on a lot of the work. More recently, however, there's been a trend for royal parents to muck in when it comes to raising a future monarch. With their mini majesty now toddling onwards and upwards, there's plenty of scope for some hands-on parenting. Traditionally, the royal parent-child relationship has been seen as rather distant.
There was a hard and fast rule that children should be seen but not heard. That sort of applied way up into the 1940s and probably into the 1950s.
Queen Elizabeth was a young queen when she ascended to the throne at 25. She already had 2 children.
They left their very young children for around 6 months to go on a tour of the Commonwealth. There was this real sense that duty needed to be followed and that the children were in the care of the nannies, and that was the way to do things.
This separation from her children was unimaginable to a young Princess Diana, herself a former nanny, and she insisted on doing things differently.
With Diana and Charles, we saw a kind of real shift when they went to do an overseas tour to Australia and New Zealand. Diana decided she wanted to take William with them, and that sort of set a whole new precedent for this idea of the family really being prioritised.
She took them on holidays, and you would see how much fun she was having with them, you know, at theme parks or on yachts, whatever it was they were doing.
This outwardly warmer approach to raising a royal child is something that has trickled down to the next generation.
When it comes to the Princess of Wales, Duchess of Sussex, they are definitely seen to be much more hands-on, much more involved in the parenting of their children.
We've had images of William rolling around on the grass with his children, really kind of relaxed, happy family moments.
And happy family moments don't come much more perfect than celebrating a child's birthday. Whilst some royal birthdays have traditionally begun with a photo call,
the Prince and Princess of Wales had brought a ball along for him to play with, but all that really interested him were the cameras.
the parties are somewhat more normal.
It's jelly and ice cream, it's bouncy castles, you might have a character turn up, but it is a regular children's birthday party. It's not all quail's eggs and things from Fortnum and Mason.
And nobody knows how to cater for a royal birthday party better than royal chef Des Sweeney.
Right, now we're going to do chocolate biscuit cake. This is royal family favourite, one of the Queen's favourite. The boys particularly liked it. Prince William had it on his stag party. It's a real family favourite. And it is the easiest chocolate cake in the world to make. It literally, it's butter, sugar, rich tea biscuits, has to be rich tea biscuits, and some really good quality chocolate. Don't use the cheap stuff. Right, really, really simple. So you cream your butter and sugar together. Cream that together for a couple of minutes so it's nice and fluffy. Then break your biscuits into little pieces, little almond-like pieces. So they're all like that, pretty much the same size. Now we're just going to melt our chocolate in a double bain-marie. Make sure the chocolate doesn't touch the water, because that will scald it and it'll go lumpy. So as you can see, nice, good quality chocolate, so there's no fat laying on top. Just pure chocolate. So you got your sugar, butter, fluffed up. Incorporate all your chocolate, and now we're just going to add our rich tea biscuits, and that's going to give us our chocolate biscuit cake. So mix it all together, right to the bottom. And once it's all mixed, into your line cake ring. Make sure you pat it down really tightly.
A couple of hours in the fridge, and another layer of melted chocolate on the top, and the cake's ready for the royal birthday party.
Because it will flake when you cut it. So it's a bit messy, but it's cake. It's fun, isn't it? So see how we get on.
The perfect royal party cake. While for today's young royals, a birthday photo shoot may be as tough as it gets. Monarchs of the past have had to contend with ruling the country before they're even potty trained. When Charles became monarch at the age of 73, he was the oldest British king ever to take the throne. To find the youngest monarch, you have to go back 600 years to 1422.
The youngest king to ever inherit the throne was King Henry VI, who became king at age 8 months and 25 days.
Henry VIII's son, Edward VI, when he was 9 years old, he had his coronation, the length of which had to be shortened because they thought, you know, here's a kid, he's not going to want to sit through this.
Whilst these youngsters were technically rulers from the moment their fathers died, they weren't left in charge alone. They had the help of a regent.
A regent is usually a member of the royal family who takes on the responsibilities and duties of being monarch, for example, overseeing the political business of monarchy, when there is someone who is incapacitated or alternatively too young to reign. Queen mothers have reigned on behalf of their children.
And of course, that itself led in many cases to quite problematic politics and factions at court, with various people trying to rule in the name of the king.
At only 12 years old, King Edward V took the throne in 1483. This premature ascension led to his death.
It ended with Uncle Richard taking the throne for himself, declaring his nephew illegitimate. And that nephew and his younger brother then disappeared in the Tower of London, presumed murdered.
Today, the line of succession is safe, and the royal relationships are somewhat more amicable, giving royal parents a different problem to worry about. Where do they go to school? While it's not every child that gets to holiday with the King and Queen of Spain or on a royal yacht, there are some things the royal offspring today have to do just like every other child their age, like learning the 3 R's. The first day at school is a big moment for any child. But it's one that centuries of royal children have never experienced.
Traditionally, royal children didn't go to school. They would be educated at home by tutors specially brought in to teach them. The reason why was because to be a royal, you need a certain set of skills. You don't need to learn about mathematics. You don't need a deep knowledge of English literature. You don't need an understanding of science.
They would have learned Latin and Greek and languages and reading about sort of politics and philosophy.
Young royal boys would be drilled in combat training. They'd have to learn how to wield a sword, should they one day have to lead their soldiers into battle. And they were essentially taught to be a royal.
And this way of homeschooling was the norm right into the 20th century.
Both Princesses Margaret and Elizabeth were educated at home, and that was the way things were done.
The young Elizabeth had some rather well-known teachers.
She had religious sessions with the Archbishop of Canterbury, so she was prepared in many ways for her future role.
Whilst Elizabeth II was homeschooled, that changed with the next generation.
The Princess Royal had started her education at home.
She then went to Benenden School in Kent. Charles followed in his father's footsteps and attended Gordonston School.
Gordonston is a school in Scotland, and it's been described as draconian because it places the emphasis very much on physical endurance. Prince Philip thrived in this atmosphere, and he really thought that it had shaped him into the future prince that he became. So he was determined that his son, Charles, would also benefit from this experience, but it turned out the exact opposite for Charles, who famously loathed his time at Gordonston and was determined that things would be very different when it came to the upbringing of his sons.
Whilst William and Harry went to regular private local primary schools, they too continued the boarding school trend.
William and Harry went to Eton. William excelled there, Harry not so much.
Never quite fitting in, Harry threw all his efforts into sport. What William and Harry may not have known, however, is that their old school was actually founded by a relative from a time gone by. It's what's known as a king's school. Whilst young royals were safely taught by their tutors and governesses, many monarchs of old played a part in educating the masses. One of the side effects of Henry VIII's religious revolution was surprisingly improved literacy.
The dissolution of the monasteries had a profound effect on national education because the monasteries had played an important role in education. But now the king had to supply that role, so he founded new schools, and actually it had a very positive impact because these new schools had the Bible in English.
And Henry's son, Edward VI, despite only being a teenager, continued his father's work and created a number of free public grammar schools. More than 20 of which, such as King Edward VI Grammar School in Chelmsford, and its namesake in Stratford-upon-Avon, which Shakespeare likely attended, are still free to attend to this day.
The foundation of these grammar schools really was a great leveller because it meant free education for all, or at least for male children. I'm afraid the girls still missed out.
Since then, monarchs and nobles have gone on to create many more such schools, helping to educate the nation. But none of them teach you how to be royal. There are some royal skills that only members of the firm, who have lived as royals, can pass down to the next generation. Behaving like a royal is tough. there are all manner of peculiar practices and traditions to adhere to, and many haven't changed for centuries.
They're taught, how to eat in public, how to behave in public, how to greet people, and they're taught that from a really young age.
This would be about how, for example, to interact with members of the court, to interact with other nobles, to engage in courting rituals.
The only way to make it stick is to live it and breathe it.
Royal children don't have etiquette coaches coming in and telling them what to do. They have their parents, they have their family, and they learn by example.
If you are polite people at home and you're nice people, your children will copy you, because at that young age, your mummy and daddy can do no wrong.
Queen Elizabeth learned a lot from her father, from speaking to him, to watching him, and her mother as well, carrying out their public engagements.
Whilst most royal babies are shown off at a young age,
We usually see royal children for the first time at Trooping the Colour. That's when they usually make their appearance as very little babies or infants.
from then on, they only make select appearances until they've learnt the ropes from mum and dad, often during pre-arranged press calls.
Right. We do our best. Watch out back. Help.
These press calls give the newspapers what they want: a nice picture of a happy family. Something William has embraced over the years with his own family.
They haven't kept them completely hidden away, but they have been very measured about when and how they've been in the public eye.
It allows a royal family to give just enough exposure, but not too much. And all it requires from the child is to sit quietly and smile.
Royal children are expected to behave with an element of decorum and politeness.
Just smile, look nice, look adorable, pose for some nice photographs.
Whilst most of the time they're very well behaved,
One of the things that the Waleses have got particularly right with all three of their children is that the eye contact is phenomenal.
it doesn't always go to plan.
For the Platinum Jubilee, we saw Prince Louis pull an entire range of faces.
Sticking his tongue out, and I think he pretended to be a lion.
And look, everyone loved it. It was hilarious. It added a little bit of levity in what was already a very happy occasion.
At the end of the day, royal youngsters are children too. But like all parents, royal parents try to impart as much wisdom as possible as their children grow up. Because as the birthdays tick by and children turn to teens and then adults,
All I can say is he makes me feel unbelievably old. To know that I have a 21-year-old son, of whom I must say I am inordinately proud.
it becomes time for the royal parents to loosen the reins and send them off to university. A tradition that started with King Charles when he became the first royal to attend.
Charles went to Cambridge University.
It represented a sort of deviation from the norm because the main education, as it were, for members of the royal family was in the military.
William had a good education at St Andrews. There was a photo call right at the very beginning when he arrived there, and there was an agreement made with the media that they would stay away.
That was very important because actually university was the one time when I think he got the closest experience to an ordinary life.
Formal education aside, there's a time when the young royal is deemed old enough and skilled enough to become a working royal in their own right.
First solo engagements are quite a big deal for young royals, and so it's not something that we'd see them do until they were teens, older teens, maybe even in their 20s.
Queen Elizabeth II did her first solo engagement on the 13th of April, 1943. Aged just 16, she visited a tank battalion of the Grenadier Guards.
Prince William's very first overseas tour was in 2005.
Visiting Auckland just a week after graduating, William joined the British and Irish Lion rugby team when they met the All Blacks on their tour to New Zealand, representing Queen Elizabeth II at World War II commemoration events.
For him, it had been quite a big undertaking, and he was early 20s. It shows you that they do obviously put trust in them from quite a young age.
Royal youngsters spend their childhoods being trained to play their part in the family business.
When they're actually starting to take in duties as a senior member of the royal family, there's no coming back. When they cross that line, you can't put it back in the box, that's it. They've then got to carry on that public role from that day forward.
While royal parents may get a little more help than most raising their children, really, they want the same thing for their little ones as we all do. A happy childhood, a good education, and a life filled with love and success.